The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the dusty general store, and Willa Van Doren pressed her trembling hand against the worn leather seat, knowing that if she did not run now, she would be trapped forever in a marriage to a man whose face she had only seen in a single faded photograph. It was the summer of 1882, and Springerville, Arizona stretched before her like a sun-bleached painting, all wooden buildings and red dirt streets baking under a relentless sky. Willa had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Boston, her small trunk containing everything she owned in the world, answering an advertisement for a mail-order bride that had promised a comfortable home and a respectable husband. What the advertisement had not mentioned was the suffocating feeling that would grip her chest as the stagecoach rolled into this remote territory town, or the overwhelming certainty that she was making the most terrible mistake of her 22 years. The driver called down something about her luggage, but Willa barely heard him. Her dark blonde hair stuck to her neck beneath her traveling bonnet, and her gray dress was covered in a fine layer of dust that no amount of brushing would remove. She stepped down from the coach, her legs unsteady after days of travel, and looked around the small main street with growing panic. A tall man stood outside the general store, his hat pushed back on his head, watching the stagecoach with an expression that might have been anticipation. Willa's heart sank. That must be him. That must be Gerald Hutchins, the man who had paid her passage west, the man who expected her to become his wife within the week. Before she could think better of it, before rational thought could overtake the desperate need to flee, Willa turned on her heel and walked quickly in the opposite direction. She did not run, that would draw too much attention, but she moved with purpose down the wooden sidewalk, past a saloon where piano music drifted through the doors, past a blacksmith shop where the ring of hammer on anvil punctuated the afternoon heat. She had no plan. She had no money beyond the few coins in her reticule. She had nowhere to go in this strange territory town, where she knew no one and understood nothing of the land or the people. But the need to escape overrode everything else. A primal instinct that told her if she climbed into a wagon with Gerald Hutchins, if she spoke vows in a church with him, she would lose something essential of herself that could never be recovered. Willa had nearly reached the edge of town when a voice called out behind her. "Madam, excuse me, madam." She did not stop. She kept walking, her boots clicking against the wooden planks, her breath coming faster. "Madam, I do not mean to alarm you, but you are heading straight into open country with no water and no supplies." The voice was different from what she had expected. Younger, perhaps, and with a gentleness that made her slow her steps despite herself. She turned reluctantly and found herself looking at a man in his mid-20s, lean and sun-weathered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of the sky just after dawn. He wore working clothes, dusty and well-worn, and there was dirt under his fingernails as if he had just come from hard labor. "I am aware of where I am going," Willa said, though this was entirely untrue. The man studied her for a moment, and she saw understanding dawn in his expression. "You are the lady from Boston, the one Gerald Hutchins has been talking about for weeks." Willa lifted her chin. "I am not anyone's lady. I see." He pushed his hat back slightly, revealing more of his face. There was a kindness in his features that made something in Willa's chest ache. "My name is Wesley Zimmerman. I own a small ranch about 3 miles north of here, and I am guessing that you just realized you cannot go through with marrying a man you have never met." The directness of his words startled her into honesty. "I cannot breathe when I think about it. I cannot make my lungs work properly." Wesley nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Gerald is not a bad man, but he is not an easy one either, set in his ways, particular about things, Some women would not mind that, but I suspect you are not one of them." "You know nothing about me," Willa said, but there was no heat in her words. "I know you are planning to walk into the desert without water," Wesley said, "which tells me you are desperate. And I know you came all the way from Boston, which tells me you had nowhere else to go. And I know you are standing here talking to me instead of running, which tells me you are smart enough to recognize when someone is trying to help." Willa felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She would not cry in front of this stranger, no matter how kind his voice. "What do you suggest I do? I have no money for a return ticket. I have no family waiting for me back east. I answered that advertisement because my father died 6 months ago and left nothing but debts, and my mother passed when I was 16. I thought perhaps a new life in the West would be better than slowly starving in a boarding house in Boston." Wesley was quiet for a moment, and in that silence, Willa heard the distant call of a bird and the creak of a windmill turning somewhere nearby. The sun beat down on her bonnet, and she realized with a distant sort of surprise that she was lightheaded from the heat and the lack of food. "Here is what I think," Wesley said finally. "I think you should not make a decision about the rest of your life when you are tired and scared and have not eaten a proper meal in days. Stay 1 week, then decide your heart." Willa stared at him. "Stay where?" "With my sister and me. Naomi has been running our household since our mother died 3 years ago. We have a small ranch, like I said. Nothing fancy, but it is respectable. You can help her with the work if you like, to earn your keep, and you can think about what you want to do without Gerald Hutchins breathing down your neck expecting an answer." "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Willa asked suspiciously. Wesley smiled, and it transformed his entire face, making him look younger and somehow more real. "Because 2 years ago, my sister was engaged to a man in town who seemed respectable enough on the surface. But she got a bad feeling about him, something in her gut that said things were not right. She tried to tell our father, but he said she was being foolish and emotional. A week before the wedding, she discovered her intended had another woman in Silver City and a child besides. Since then, I have learned to trust when a woman says her instincts are telling her to run." Willa felt something loosen in her chest, just slightly. "Gerald Hutchins does not know where I have gone. He saw you get off the stage. By now, half the town knows you walked away. He will be angry, but he will not come after you if you are staying at a respectable house with proper supervision." Wesley gestured back toward the main street. "Let me collect your trunk from the stage, and then we can head out to the ranch. Naomi will have supper ready soon, and you look like you could use a good meal and a safe place to sleep." Willa knew she should not trust this man. She had been raised to be cautious, to understand that men often said kind things to get what they wanted. But there was something in Wesley Zimmerman's eyes, something steady and honest, that made her want to believe him. And more than that, she simply had no other options. "1 week," she said quietly. "Then I will decide." Wesley nodded. 1 week. They walked back toward the main street together, and Willa tried not to notice the way people stared as they passed. A woman in a faded calico dress paused her sweeping to watch them with open curiosity. 2 men outside the saloon stopped their conversation to turn and look. Willa kept her eyes straight ahead, her back rigid with borrowed dignity. Gerald Hutchins was still standing outside the general store, but now his expression had shifted from anticipation to confusion, to something darker. He was a man in his early 40s, Willa estimated, with graying hair and a thick mustache. His clothes were well made, his boots polished despite the dusty street. He looked like a man of means, a man used to getting what he paid for. "Hutchins," Wesley said evenly as they approached. "Zimmerman." Gerald's eyes moved to Willa, and she felt the weight of his gaze like a physical thing. This is my intended bride. I do not know what she has been telling you, but there seems to have been some confusion." "No confusion," Willa said, finding her voice. "I have changed my mind. I am very sorry for the trouble and expense, but I cannot marry you." Gerald's face darkened. "Cannot or will not?" "Both," Willa said. "I paid your passage. I have been preparing my home for your arrival. I placed that advertisement in good faith, expecting an honest woman who would honor her commitment." Wesley stepped slightly forward, not threatening but present. "The lady has made her decision. She is going to be staying at my ranch for the next week as a guest of my sister. After that, she can decide what she wants to do." Gerald's eyes narrowed. "Your ranch, how convenient." "It is not like that," Willa said quickly. "Mr. Zimmerman has been kind enough to offer me a place to stay while I consider my options. Nothing improper." "You have no options," Gerald said flatly. "You have no money, no connections, no way to support yourself. You can refuse to marry me if you choose, but you will find that the West is not kind to women alone." The words were meant to frighten her, and they did, but they also sparked something else in Willa's chest. Anger. Hot and bright and clarifying. "Then I will have to be unkind back," she said. "I will not marry a man I do not know simply because it is convenient or practical or expected. I would rather take my chances alone." For a moment, Gerald looked as if he might argue further, but something in Wesley's stance, in the quiet way he stood beside Willa, seemed to change his mind. He straightened his vest and adjusted his hat. "You will regret this," he said to Willa. "When you are scrubbing floors in a boarding house or worse, you will remember that you had the chance for a comfortable life and threw it away." He turned and walked back into the general store, the door closing behind him with a sharp crack. Willa let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Her hands were shaking. "Your trunk is over here," Wesley said gently, as if nothing unusual had just occurred. He hefted the small leather trunk onto his shoulder with easy strength and nodded toward a wagon at the end of the street. "The ranch is about 3 miles out. The road is decent, so we should be there before dark." Willa followed him to the wagon, climbing up onto the bench seat with his assistants. Her legs still felt unsteady, but whether from travel or from the confrontation with Gerald Hutchins, she could not say. Wesley secured her trunk in the back and then swung up beside her, taking the reins of 2 sturdy horses. As they rolled out of Springerville, Willa looked back once at the small town. The buildings already seemed to shimmer in the heat, becoming less real somehow, as if they might be a mirage. She turned forward again, focusing on the road ahead, on the landscape that surrounded them. It was beautiful in a stark way that she had not expected. The land rolled in gentle swells, covered in pale grass that rippled in the hot wind. In the distance, she could see mountains, blue and hazy with heat. The sky was so vast it made her feel small and large at the same time, as if she were both insignificant and somehow essential to this landscape. "It is different from Boston, I imagine," Wesley said, and there was no judgment in his voice, only curiosity. "Very different," Willa agreed. "Boston is all brick and cobblestones and buildings pressed together so tightly you can barely see the sky. I used to walk in the public garden sometimes, just to remember what trees looked like." "You have trees here," Wesley said. "Just different kinds, juniper and pinyon pine in the higher elevations. Cottonwoods along the creeks. They are not like the big old oaks back east, but they are something." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the wagon creaking and the horses' hooves thudding against the packed dirt road. Willa found herself relaxing incrementally, the tension in her shoulders easing as the town disappeared behind them. "Tell me about your sister," she said finally. "Will she mind having a stranger in her home?" Wesley smiled. "Naomi will be delighted. She does not get much female company out at the ranch. Most of the neighboring women are busy with their own families, and town is far enough that she only goes in once or twice a month. She has been after me to hire a girl to help with the house, but we have not had the funds. So your timing is actually quite good if you do not mind the work." "I do not mind work," Willa said. "I have been working since I was old enough to hold a needle. My mother was a seamstress and she taught me her trade. After she died, I took in sewing and mending to help my father with expenses. After he passed, I continued, but it was never quite enough." "Can you cook?" Wesley asked. "Adequately. I will not poison anyone, but I am no French chef." Wesley laughed, a warm sound that made something flutter in Willa's stomach. "Naomi will appreciate any help she can get. We run about 30 head of cattle, plus chickens and a few pigs. It is just the two of us and a hired hand named Tom who comes 3 times a week to help with the heavy work. Nothing grand, but it is ours. Our father homesteaded the land 15 years ago, and we have been building it up ever since." "It must be hard work," Willa said. "It is," Wesley agreed, "but it is good work, honest work. I like knowing that what I build with my hands will last, that I am putting down roots in this land." There was something in his voice when he spoke about the ranch, a pride and a tenderness that made Willa look at him more closely. In profile, he had a strong jaw and a straight nose, and the lines around his eyes suggested he smiled often. His hands on the reins were capable and scarred, the hands of a man who knew hard labor. "What about you?" Wesley asked, glancing at her. "What would you do if you could do anything? If money and propriety and all those concerns did not matter?" No one had ever asked Willa that question before. She thought about it carefully, watching a hawk circle lazily in the sky above them. "I think I would have my own dress shop," she said slowly. "A real one, with a front window and a bell on the door and shelves of fabric in every color you can imagine. I would make beautiful things for women, dresses that made them feel special and seen. Not just practical things, but beautiful things." "That does not sound impossible," Wesley said. "Difficult, maybe, but not impossible." "It is impossible for a woman with no money and no prospects," Willa said, but she smiled as she said it, because for the first time in months she was allowing herself to imagine a future that was not simply about survival. They crested a small rise and the ranch came into view below them. It was modest, as Wesley had said, but well kept. A main house with a covered porch, a barn that looked sturdy and freshly painted, a chicken coop, several corrals. Trees, the cottonwoods Wesley had mentioned, lined what must be a creek, their leaves flickering green and silver in the wind. "Home," Wesley said simply. A woman emerged from the house as they approached, shading her eyes with one hand. She was younger than Willa had expected, perhaps 20 or 21, with Wesley's same dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. She wore a simple dress covered by an apron, and her face lit up with curiosity as the wagon rolled to a stop. "Wesley, you did not tell me we were having company," she called. "It was a recent development," Wesley said, jumping down and coming around to help Willa from the wagon. "Naomi, this is Miss Willa Van Doren, lately of Boston. Willa, my sister Naomi." Naomi's eyes widened with understanding. "The mail-order bride, the one Gerald Hutchins has been going on about." "The former mail-order bride," Willa corrected. "I have decided not to go through with the arrangement." "Good for you," Naomi said immediately and warmly. "Gerald Hutchins is a pompous windbag who treats his horses better than he would treat a wife. Come inside, you look exhausted. Wesley, bring her trunk up to the spare room." Before Willa could protest or explain or do anything, Naomi had taken her arm and was leading her toward the house, chattering about supper and how long the journey from Boston must have been. and how glad she was to have another woman to talk to. The kindness was so immediate and genuine that Willa felt tears threaten again, and she had to blink rapidly to keep them at bay. The inside of the house was cool and dim after the bright sunlight, and Willa's eyes took a moment to adjust. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace at one end and a sturdy wooden table at the other. The furniture was simple but well made, and everything was clean and organized. Wildflowers in a jar sat on the table, their cheerful faces bright against the worn wood. "Sit," Naomi commanded, pulling out a chair. "You look like you are about to fall over." "When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning," Willa admitted. "There was a stop for the stage, but I was not hungry then." "Well, you will eat now." Naomi bustled over to the stove, where something was already simmering in a large pot. "I have beef stew and I baked bread this morning. Nothing fancy, but it will fill you up." Wesley came in with the trunk, carrying it easily despite its weight, and disappeared down a short hallway. Willa heard the sound of a door opening and closing, and then he returned, settling into a chair across from her. "I told her she could stay for a week," he said to his sister, "to give her time to figure out what she wants to do." "A week is not nearly long enough to figure out your whole life," Naomi said, ladling stew into a bowl. "But it is a start. Here, eat this." Willa took the bowl and the chunk of bread Naomi offered, and the smell alone made her stomach clench with hunger. She forced herself to eat slowly, to take small bites, even though her body wanted to devour everything in front of her. The stew was rich and flavorful, the beef tender, the vegetables perfectly cooked. The bread was crusty on the outside and soft within, still faintly warm. "This is delicious," she said, and meant it. Naomi beamed. "I am glad you think so. Wesley complains that I make the same 5 things over and over, but they are good 5 things, I think." "I have never complained," Wesley protested. "I have merely suggested that variety is the spice of life." "You suggested that once, 3 years ago, and I have never let you forget it," Naomi said. But she was smiling. Willa watched them banter, this easy affection between siblings, and felt a pang of loneliness so sharp it almost took her breath away. She had been an only child, and after her mother died, it had been just her and her father in their small rooms above the tailor shop. He had been a quiet man, prone to long silences and longer worries, and their life together had been one of routine and careful economy. She had loved him, but it had not been like this warmth and teasing and casual joy. After supper, Naomi showed her to the spare room, a small space with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. It was simple and clean, and the bed had been made up with fresh linens that smelled of sunshine and lavender. "I know it is not much," Naomi said, "but it is yours for as long as you need it." "It is perfect," Willa said honestly. Thank you both." "I do not know why you are being so kind to me, but I am more grateful than I can say." Naomi squeezed her hand. "We have all needed help at some point. I am just glad Wesley found you before you walked off into the desert. Get some rest. We will talk more in the morning." After Naomi left, Willa sank down onto the bed, her body finally acknowledging how exhausted she was. She should unpack, she should wash the dust from her face and hands, she should do something productive. Instead, she lay back against the pillow and closed her eyes, and sleep claimed her almost instantly. She woke once in the night, disoriented by the unfamiliar darkness and the silence. In Boston, there had always been noise, the sound of other residents in the boarding house, the clatter of carriages on the street, the distant factory whistles marking the hours. Here, there was only the whisper of wind and the occasional call of some night bird. It should have been frightening, but instead Willa found it peaceful. She rolled over and slept again, deeply and dreamlessly. Morning came early, announced by a rooster's crow and the pale light creeping through her window. Willa dressed quickly in one of her simpler dresses, a brown calico that had seen better days but was still serviceable, and made her way to the kitchen. Naomi was already there, working at the stove, and Wesley sat at the table with a cup of coffee. They both looked up when she entered, and Wesley stood politely. "Good morning," Willa said. "I apologize for sleeping so late." "Late," Naomi laughed. "It is barely past dawn. You city people have strange ideas about time. Coffee, please." Willa accepted the cup gratefully and took a seat at the table. The coffee was strong and hot, and it chased away the last cobwebs of sleep. "What can I do to help?" she asked. "You mentioned work in exchange for room and board, and I meant what I said. I am not afraid of work." Naomi looked pleased. "Well, if you are serious, I could use help with the washing today. We have a creek down past the barn, and Monday is always wash day. After that, there are vegetables to pick in the garden, and I need to churn butter, and the chickens need feeding." "I can do all of that," Willa said, "though I confess I have never churned butter before. We bought ours from the market in Boston." "I will teach you," Naomi said. "It is not difficult, just tedious." Wesley drained his coffee and stood. "I will be out checking fence lines today. Tom will be here around midday to help with some repairs on the barn roof. If you need anything, just holler." He settled his hat on his head and headed for the door, pausing just before he stepped outside. "Willa," she looked up. "Yes, I am glad you stayed." Then he was gone, the door closing behind him, and Willa was left staring after him with a strange warmth spreading through her chest. The morning passed quickly, filled with work that was both familiar and foreign. Washing clothes in a creek was different from washing them in a basin in a tiny room, but the principle was the same: scrub and rinse and wring and hang. The sun climbed higher, and Willa felt sweat dampening her hairline, but there was something satisfying about the physical labor, about seeing the results of her efforts hanging clean and bright on the line. Naomi worked beside her, chatting about the ranch, about the neighbors, about life in Springerville. She spoke about the harsh winters and the beautiful springs, about the dangers of drought and the blessing of rain, about the time a mountain lion had killed 3 of their chickens, and Wesley had tracked it for 2 days to make sure it did not come back. "He is a good man, my brother," Naomi said, wringing out a shirt. "Sometimes I worry that he works too hard, that he does not have time for anything but the ranch, but this place means everything to him." After our father died, Wesley could have sold and moved somewhere easier, somewhere with more opportunity, but he wanted to keep building what Pa started. "That is admirable," Willa said. "It is also stubborn," Naomi said with a smile. "But then all the Zimmermans are stubborn. It is a family trait." They moved on to the garden, where Willa helped pick beans and squash and tomatoes, marveling at how different a garden looked here compared to the small plots she had seen in Boston. Everything seemed to grow larger, more vigorously, as if the plants were determined to prove they could thrive in this harsh landscape. At midday, they heard the sound of hoofbeats, and a grizzled man in his 50s rode up to the barn. This must be Tom, the hired hand Wesley had mentioned. He tipped his hat to them and dismounted, heading toward where Wesley was working on the barn roof. Naomi prepared a simple lunch of cold meat and bread and pickles, and they ate on the porch, enjoying the slight breeze that had picked up. From where they sat, Willa could see Wesley and Tom working on the roof, their movements coordinated and efficient. "He likes you," Naomi said suddenly. Willa nearly choked on her water. "I beg your pardon, Wesley, he likes you, I can tell." "He barely knows me," Willa protested. "I have been here less than a day." "Sometimes you just know," Naomi said with the confidence of youth. "When he came home last night and told me what had happened, how he had found you trying to run away, there was something in his voice. I have not heard him talk about a woman like that since Mary Ellen Turner broke his heart 2 years ago." "What happened with Mary Ellen Turner?" Willa asked before she could stop herself. "She wanted more than a rancher's wife could have," Naomi said. "She wanted fine dresses and trips to San Francisco and a big house in town. Wesley could not give her those things, so she married a banker from Silver City instead. It hurt him, but he got over it. And I think maybe it was for the best, because Mary Ellen would never have been happy here." Willa did not know what to say to that. She focused on her food, on the taste of the bread and the sharp bite of the pickles, but she could not stop herself from glancing toward the barn, toward the man working in the hot sun. The afternoon was spent churning butter, which was indeed tedious but not difficult, and then helping Naomi prepare supper. Willa found herself falling into an easy rhythm with the other woman, their movements synchronized as they worked. It reminded her of working alongside her mother in their small kitchen, and the memory was bittersweet. Supper was fried chicken and potatoes and green beans from the garden, simple food made delicious by fresh ingredients and Naomi's capable cooking. Wesley and Tom joined them, both men dusty and tired but satisfied with their day's work. "Roof is solid now," Tom said around a mouthful of chicken. "Should last another few years, barring any major storms." "Good," Wesley said. "That is one less thing to worry about." Tom's eyes drifted to Willa with undisguised curiosity. "You are the lady from Boston, the one who was supposed to marry Gerald Hutchins." "I am," Willa said, lifting her chin slightly. "Lucky escape," Tom said bluntly. "Gerald is tight with $1 and quick with his temper." "You would have been miserable." "That is what I was afraid of," Willa admitted. "So what will you do?" Tom asked. "Stay here, go back east, try to find work in town?" "I do not know yet," Willa said. "I have a week to decide." Tom nodded and went back to his food, apparently satisfied with that answer. After supper, he rode off into the gathering dusk, and Wesley went to check on the animals one last time before bed. Willa helped Naomi with the dishes, washing while the other woman dried. "Thank you for today," Willa said, "for letting me work, for treating me like I belong here." "You do belong here," Naomi said simply. "For this week at least, and maybe longer if you decide you want to stay." That night, Willa lay in her narrow bed and thought about what Naomi had said. "Wesley likes you." The words played over and over in her mind, and she found herself remembering the way he had looked at her in town, the gentleness in his voice when he had offered her a place to stay. Stay 1 week, then decide your heart. But what if a week was not enough time? What if her heart decided something her head knew was foolish? Willa pushed the thoughts away and closed her eyes, willing herself to sleep. The next few days fell into a pattern. Willa rose early and worked alongside Naomi, learning the rhythms of ranch life. She fed chickens and collected eggs, pulled weeds in the garden and picked vegetables, helped with cooking and cleaning and mending. Her hands, soft from city life, began to develop calluses. Her skin, pale from spending most of her time indoors, started to brown from the sun despite her bonnet. Wesley was often nearby, working on one project or another, and Willa found herself increasingly aware of his presence. The way he moved, efficient and purposeful. The way he spoke to his animals, gentle and respectful. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not watching, something warm and questioning in his eyes. On the third day, he asked if she would like to ride out with him to check on the cattle grazing in the far pasture. "You do not have to," he said quickly. "I know you have plenty to do here, but I thought you might like to see more of the ranch, and Naomi could probably use a break from having you underfoot." "I am not underfoot," Naomi called from inside the house. "But you should go. The ride will do you good." So Willa found herself sitting on a gentle mare named Daisy, following Wesley across the rolling grassland. She had not ridden much in Boston, only a few times in the park, but Daisy was patient with her inexperience, and Wesley kept the pace easy. The land seemed to stretch forever, empty and full at the same time. Willa could see for miles in every direction, nothing but grass and sky and the distant mountains. It was both exhilarating and slightly terrifying, this vastness. "Does it ever feel lonely?" she asked Wesley as they rode. Being out here with so few people, Wesley considered the question. "Sometimes," he admitted, "especially in winter when the weather keeps us close to the house. But I think there is a difference between being alone and being lonely. I am alone a lot, but I do not often feel lonely." "I was lonely in Boston," Willa said, "surrounded by thousands of people, and I still felt completely alone." "Then maybe you needed a different kind of people," Wesley said, "or maybe you just needed more space to breathe." They found the cattle grazing peacefully in a wide valley, the creek running through it providing water. Wesley counted them carefully, checking that none were missing or injured, and Willa watched the way he worked, the care he took. 32 head, he said finally, satisfied. All accounted for. They dismounted to let the horses drink from the creek, and Wesley showed Willa how to identify some of the plants growing nearby. Sagebrush and rabbit brush, Indian paintbrush with its bright red blooms, prickly pear cactus with its flat petals. "You have to respect the land here," he said, running his hand over a sage plant so that its pungent scent filled the air. "It will provide for you if you treat it right, but it will kill you if you are careless or stupid." "That seems harsh," Willa said. "It is harsh," Wesley agreed. "But it is also honest. There is no pretense in the desert. Things are what they are." They sat for a while on the bank of the creek, listening to the water and the wind, and Willa felt something shift inside her. A loosening, a softening, as if parts of herself she had kept tightly bound were beginning to unfurl. "Tell me about your father," Wesley said. "What was he like?" Willa picked a blade of grass and twisted it between her fingers. "Quiet. Worried. He was a bookkeeper, and he spent his whole life adding up other people's numbers. After my mother died, he became even quieter, even more worried. I think he was afraid all the time that something else would go wrong, that he would lose me too. So he tried to control everything, to make everything safe and certain. But you cannot make life safe, can you? Things happen anyway." "No," Wesley said softly, "you cannot make life safe, but you can choose to live it anyway, knowing that." "Is that what you are doing?" Willa asked. "Choosing to live. Every day," Wesley said. "Every time I get up before dawn and go out to fix a fence or tend to a sick animal or worry about whether it will rain enough this year. Every time I make that choice, I am saying yes, this life is worth living. This work is worth doing." Willa looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his face that made her heart ache. Determination and hope, and a kind of quiet courage that she had never encountered before. This was not a man who did things halfway or gave up when things got difficult. This was a man who had decided what mattered to him and was willing to work for it every single day. "I think I am starting to understand why you love it here," she said. Wesley smiled. "It has a way of getting under your skin, the West. It is not for everyone, but for those it suits. There is nowhere else they would rather be." They rode back to the ranch as the afternoon was fading into evening, and Willa felt something settle in her chest. Not certainty exactly, but a kind of peace. A sense that maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she needed to be. That night after supper, Naomi brought out a worn guitar and convinced Wesley to play. He protested, but not very hard, and soon the sound of music filled the small house. He played old ballads and folk songs, his voice surprisingly good, and Naomi sang along on some of them. Willa listened, curled in a chair with a basket of mending, and felt something dangerously close to contentment. When Naomi yawned and declared she was going to bed, Willa stood to follow, but Wesley spoke softly. "Stay a moment. If you are not too tired." Willa sat back down, her heart suddenly beating faster. Naomi disappeared down the hallway with a knowing smile, and then it was just the two of them in the flickering lamplight. "I want to ask you something," Wesley said, setting the guitar aside. "But I do not want you to feel pressured or obligated in any way." "All right," Willa said cautiously. "What do you think about staying longer than a week?" He held up his hand before she could respond. "I am not asking you to marry me. I am not even asking you to make any kind of commitment. I am just saying that if you need more time to figure out what you want, you are welcome here. Naomi loves having you around, and you have been a real help with the work. And well, I like having you here too." Willa's throat felt tight. "Wesley, I cannot just impose on your hospitality indefinitely." "It is not imposing if we are inviting you," Wesley said. "Look, I know this is all strange and sudden. A week ago, you did not know we existed. But sometimes I think the best things in life are the ones we do not plan for. The ones that just happen because we are brave enough to say yes when an opportunity comes along." "What kind of opportunity do you think this is?" Willa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Wesley leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes serious. "I think it is an opportunity for you to figure out what you want your life to look like without the pressure of a man you do not know expecting you to marry him. And I think it is an opportunity for me to get to know someone remarkable who walked into my life purely by chance. And maybe, if we are both very lucky, it could become something more than that, but only if you want it to." Willa's hands were shaking. She twisted them together in her lap, trying to still them. "I am afraid," she admitted. "I am afraid of making another mistake, of choosing wrong again. I was so sure that coming west was the right decision, and then the moment I arrived, I knew it was all wrong. How can I trust my own judgment after that?" "You knew it was wrong, and you had the courage to walk away," Wesley said. "That does not sound like bad judgment to me. That sounds like someone who knows how to listen to herself. But what if I am listening wrong? What if I stay here and I am happy for a while, and then I realize it was just another mistake?" Wesley sat back, considering. "I cannot promise you that everything will work out perfectly. I cannot promise that you will not have doubts or regrets, but I can promise that whatever you decide, I will respect it. If you want to stay, stay. If you want to go, I will help you figure out where and how. And if somewhere down the line you realize this is not the life you want, I will not hold you here against your will. The choice will always be yours." Willa felt tears slip down her cheeks, and she did not bother to wipe them away. "Why are you being so kind to me? You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." "I am being kind because kindness costs me nothing," Wesley said simply. "And because when I look at you, I see someone who has been brave enough to cross a continent looking for a better life. That deserves respect. That deserves support." "What do you see when you look at me?" Willa asked, not sure she wanted to know the answer. Wesley was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle. "I see someone smart and capable and strong. I see someone who is scared but doing it anyway. I see someone who knows how to work hard and who does not complain even when things are difficult. And I see someone I would very much like to get to know better, if she is willing." Willa could not stop the tears now, could not even pretend to have them under control. She pressed her hands to her face and cried, not sad tears but something else, something that felt like relief and hope and terror all mixed together. Wesley stood and crossed to where she sat, kneeling beside her chair. He did not touch her, but his presence was warm and solid. "It is all right," he said softly. "Whatever you are feeling, it is all right." "I do not know what I am feeling," Willa said through her tears. "I do not know anything anymore." "Then do not try to know," Wesley said. Just stay, one day at a time, and see what happens." Willa lowered her hands and looked at him, this man who had appeared in her life at exactly the moment she needed him most. His face was kind and patient, and there was something in his eyes that made her want to trust him, even though trust was terrifying. "One day at a time," she repeated. "One day at a time," Wesley confirmed. The week Willa had promised to stay came and went, and she did not leave. She did not make a conscious decision to stay longer. She simply woke each morning and went about her work, and the days turned into more days, and no one mentioned her leaving. Life on the ranch continued its steady rhythm. Willa learned how to bake bread and churn butter without instruction. She learned how to tell when a chicken was about to go broody and how to coax a stubborn cow into moving. She learned the names of the stars Wesley pointed out on clear nights and the sound of coyotes singing in the distance. She also learned about Wesley. She learned that he loved coffee strong and hot, that he had a sweet tooth for anything with honey, that he sang to himself when he thought no one was listening. She learned that he had a temper but rarely showed it, that he was generous to a fault with neighbors who needed help, that he worried constantly about having enough water for the animals and enough money to make it through lean times. And she learned that Naomi had been right. Wesley liked her. More than liked her. It was in the way he saved her the best piece of meat at supper, in the way he always asked if she needed anything before he rode out for the day, in the way he looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention. The realization should have frightened her more than it did. Instead, she found herself thinking about him at odd moments, wondering where he was and what he was doing, looking forward to the evenings when they would all sit together and talk about their day. 3 weeks after her arrival, a group of neighbors came to help with a barn raising for a family whose structure had collapsed in a summer storm. Wesley invited Willa to come along, and she found herself in the midst of a dozen families, everyone working together to frame and raise the new barn. The women prepared food while the men worked, and Willa found herself welcomed into their circle without question. They asked about Boston with genuine curiosity, shared gossip about people Willa did not know, included her in their conversations as if she had always been there. One woman, Sarah Mitchell, a capable-looking mother of 4, pulled Willa aside at one point. "So you are staying at the Zimmerman place," she said. "I am helping Naomi with the housework," Willa said carefully. Sarah smiled. "Wesley Zimmerman is a good man, solid, trustworthy. If he has taken an interest in you, you could do much worse." Willa felt her cheeks heat. "I do not know that he has taken an interest." "Oh, he has," Sarah said with confidence. "I have known Wesley since he was a boy, and I have never seen him look at a woman the way he looks at you. Not even Mary Ellen, and we all thought he would marry her for sure." "He told me about Mary Ellen," Willa said. "Did he tell you that she came back last month? Turns out the banker was not such a good catch after all. He gambles and he drinks, and he spent most of her dowry on bad investments." She wanted to know if Wesley would take her back. Willa's stomach clenched. "What did he say?" He said no. Told her kindly but firmly that she had made her choice and he had moved on. That was about 2 weeks before you arrived. Sarah squeezed Willa's arm. "I am telling you this so you know that when Wesley decides something, he means it. He does not go back on his word, and he does not change his mind lightly. If he has decided he cares about you, it is real." The rest of the day passed in a blur of work and food and conversation. By the time the sun was setting, the barn frame was up, and everyone gathered for a celebratory supper. Children ran between the adults, playing games Willa did not recognize. Someone brought out a fiddle, and there was dancing in the space that would soon be the new barn floor. Wesley asked Willa to dance, and she accepted, letting him lead her through the steps of a simple reel. She was not a good dancer, but he was patient, guiding her with gentle pressure on her waist and hand. When the music ended, they were both laughing and breathless, and Willa realized with a start that she could not remember the last time she had laughed like that, free and unguarded. On the ride home, with Naomi dozing in the back of the wagon, Wesley spoke quietly. "Did you have a good time today?" "I did," Willa said honestly. "Everyone was so welcoming. It felt like being part of something." "You are part of something," Wesley said. "If you want to be, these people, they are not just neighbors, they are community. They show up for each other, they help when help is needed. And if you decide to stay, they will do the same for you." "If I decide to stay," Willa repeated softly. "Have you been thinking about it?" Wesley asked. "I have been thinking about almost nothing else," Willa admitted. "Wesley, I need to tell you something." He glanced at her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "I am listening." "When I came west, I was running from an empty life in Boston. I thought that all I needed was to not be where I was, that anywhere else would be better. But staying with you and Naomi, working on the ranch, meeting all these people, I have realized something. I was not just running from something. I was running towards something, even though I did not know what it was." "And do you know now," Wesley asked quietly, "what you were running toward?" Willa took a breath, gathering her courage. "I think I was running toward a life that felt real, work that mattered, people who cared, a place where I could put down roots and build something lasting." She paused. "And I think I might have found that here." The wagon creaked along the road, and for a moment Wesley did not respond. Then he reached over and took her hand, his palm rough and warm against hers. "I am very glad to hear you say that," he said, "because I have been hoping you would feel that way." They did not speak more, but Wesley did not let go of her hand for the rest of the ride home. The next morning, Willa woke to the sound of shouting. She dressed quickly and hurried out to find Wesley and Tom standing near the barn, looking at something on the ground. Naomi was already there, her face pale. "What happened?" Willa asked. "Someone cut the fence on the south pasture," Wesley said grimly, "and they spooked the cattle. Half of them scattered. We will have to spend the day rounding them up." "Who would do such a thing?" Naomi asked. Tom spat in the dirt. "I have a pretty good idea. Gerald Hutchins was in town yesterday, drinking and talking about how he was made a fool by some Eastern girl, and one of his ranch hands was seen riding out this direction last night." Wesley's jaw tightened. "You do not know that for certain?" "I know enough," Tom said, "and so do you." Willa felt sick. "This is my fault. If I had not come here, if I had just married him like I was supposed to—" "Do not finish that sentence," Wesley said sharply. "This is not your fault. If Gerald is behind this, it is because he is a petty, vindictive man who cannot stand being told no. That is his failing, not yours. But your cattle will be rounded up," Wesley said firmly. "It will take time and work, but we will get them back. Do not worry about this, Willa. You have done nothing wrong." But Willa did worry. She worried all day as Wesley and Tom rode out to search for the scattered cattle. She worried as she helped Naomi with the chores, her mind only half on what she was doing. She worried that her presence had brought trouble to these good people who had shown her nothing but kindness. By late afternoon, Wesley and Tom had found most of the cattle and driven them back to the ranch. They were both exhausted and dusty, and Wesley's face was tight with anger he was trying to control. 28 head, he said. 4 are still missing. We will look again tomorrow." "Did you see any sign of who did it?" Naomi asked. "Hoof prints, but nothing we could identify for certain," Wesley said. "Whoever it was knew what they were doing. They cut the wire in a place that would not be noticed right away and spooked the herd just enough to scatter them without causing a stampede. That evening, after supper, Willa found Wesley sitting on the porch steps, staring out at the darkening land. She sat down beside him, not speaking, just being present. "I am sorry," she said finally. "I know you said it is not my fault, but I still feel responsible." "You are not responsible for another man's actions," Wesley said. "But I would be lying if I said I was not angry, not at you, at the situation, at the fact that a man can behave like this and face no real consequences. Will you go to the sheriff and tell him what? That I think Gerald Hutchins had someone cut my fence, but I have no proof. That will accomplish nothing except making more bad blood." Wesley rubbed his face tiredly. "No, I will fix the fence and find my cattle and move on. That is all I can do." "I could leave," Willa said quietly. "If that would make things easier for you." Wesley turned to look at her, and there was something fierce in his expression. "Is that what you want, to leave?" "No," Willa admitted, "but I do not want to cause you problems either." "Then stay," Wesley said. "Stay and let me worry about the problems. Stay and keep helping Naomi and eating supper with us and just stay, please." There was something raw in his voice, something that went beyond the missing cattle and the cut fence. Willa reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I will stay," she said. Wesley squeezed her hand, and they sat like that until full dark, watching the stars emerge one by one from the deepening blue. The next few days were tense. Wesley found the 4 missing cattle, but one had been injured in its panicked flight and had to be put down. The loss hit the ranch hard, not just economically but emotionally. Wesley blamed himself for not checking the fences more carefully, for not anticipating trouble. Willa did what she could, taking on extra work so that Wesley could focus on securing the ranch and making sure no other incidents occurred. She rose even earlier than usual, working until her body ached, trying to ease the burden however she could. One evening, nearly a month after her arrival, Willa was mending a shirt of Wesley's on the porch when she heard a horse approaching. She looked up to see Gerald Hutchins riding toward the house, and her heart began to pound. She stood, calling for Wesley, who emerged from the barn at a run. He took one look at Gerald and his expression hardened. "Hutchins, what do you want?" Gerald dismounted slowly, his eyes on Willa. "I came to speak with Miss Van Doren, alone if you do not mind." "I mind very much," Wesley said. "Anything you have to say to her can be said in front of me." Gerald's mouth tightened, but he did not argue. "Very well. Miss Van Doren, I have come to make you an offer. I am willing to overlook the embarrassment you caused me. I am willing to still marry you if you agree to return to town with me now." Willa stared at him. "Why would I do that?" "Because you have no other options," Gerald said bluntly. "You are living here in sin, working as a servant for a man who will never marry you. You have no money, no prospects, no future. Marry me and I will give you respectability. A home, security." "I am not living in sin," Willa said, her voice shaking with anger. "I am working as a household helper, and there is nothing improper about it. And I would rather scrub floors for the rest of my life than marry a man who would cut fences and scatter cattle out of spite." Gerald's eyes widened slightly, the only sign that her accusation had hit home. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Yes, you do," Wesley said quietly. "And we both know that if I went to the sheriff and made an official complaint, it would be my word against yours and nothing would come of it. But that does not mean it did not happen." "You have no proof," Gerald said. "No," Wesley agreed. "But I know and you know, and that is enough for me." Gerald looked between them and something ugly crossed his face. "You will regret this. Both of you, you are making a mistake, Miss Van Doren." "No," Willa said clearly. "The mistake would be saying yes to you. Now please leave. You are not welcome here." For a moment, Gerald looked as if he might argue further. Then he mounted his horse and rode away, his back stiff with anger. Willa watched him go, her hands still shaking. Wesley moved to stand beside her, close but not touching. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I think so," Willa said. "Wesley, I thank you for standing with me, for not pressuring me to just accept his offer and make things easier." "I would never pressure you into something like that," Wesley said. "Your life is your own, Willa. Your choices are your own. I might hope you make choices that keep you here with me, but I would never force that." Willa turned to look at him, really look at him. The sun was setting behind him, turning the sky gold and pink and orange, and his face was serious and kind and so dear that it made her chest ache. "Wesley," she said carefully, "when you say you hope I make choices that keep me here with you, what exactly do you mean?" Wesley took off his hat and turned it in his hands, a nervous gesture she had never seen from him before. "I mean that over the past month you have become important to me. More than important. I think about you all the time. I look forward to seeing you every morning. I find excuses to be near you. And I know it is too soon. I know you have only been here a few weeks, but I cannot help how I feel." "How do you feel?" Willa whispered. Wesley met her eyes. "I am falling in love with you. Maybe have already fallen. And I know that is not fair, to put that on you when you are still figuring things out, but I needed you to know. I need you to understand that when I ask you to stay, it is not just as a housekeeper or a helper. I am asking you to stay because I want you in my life, because I cannot imagine it without you anymore." Willa could not breathe, could not think, could only feel the enormity of what he was saying, the gift of his honesty. "I am falling in love with you too," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "I have been trying not to, trying to be practical and sensible, but I cannot help it. You are good and kind, and you make me feel safe. You make me feel seen. And when I think about leaving, about going anywhere else, I feel like I am suffocating." Wesley dropped his hat and reached for her, pulling her into his arms. Willa went willingly, pressing her face against his chest, feeling his heart beating strong and fast under her cheek. "Stay," he said into her hair. "Not for a week, not to decide, just stay. Be here with me." "Yes," Willa said. "Yes, I will stay." Wesley pulled back just enough to cup her face in his hands, and then he kissed her, soft and gentle and full of promise. Willa kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it, all the fear and hope and desperate joy. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Naomi was standing in the doorway with the biggest smile Willa had ever seen. "Finally," she said. "I thought I was going to have to lock you two in a room together." Wesley laughed, the sound free and happy, and Willa found herself laughing too, giddy with relief and happiness. That night they sat together on the porch, Willa tucked against Wesley's side, and talked about the future. Not in vague terms, but in specific, concrete plans. Wesley wanted to expand the herd, maybe add some horses. Willa talked about her dream of a dress shop, and Wesley said there was no reason she could not make it happen, that Springerville was growing and would need a good seamstress. "We could build you a workroom," he said, "in one of the outbuildings. Nothing fancy at first, but somewhere you could take orders and work on dresses. Naomi could help spread the word to the other women in the area." "You would do that?" Willa asked. "Help me start a business?" "Of course," Wesley said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "If you are going to be my wife, your dreams are my dreams." Willa's heart stuttered. "Your wife?" Wesley turned to look at her, suddenly uncertain. I am sorry, I should have asked properly. I do not have a ring, and this is not very romantic, but Willa, will you marry me? Will you stay here and build a life with me and let me love you for as long as we both live?" Willa thought about the journey that had brought her here. The fear and the desperation, the long stage-coach ride, the moment she had decided to run. She thought about Wesley finding her, about his offer to let her stay for a week, about how that week had turned into the most important weeks of her life. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married 6 weeks later in the small church in Springerville, with Naomi as maid of honor and Tom standing up as best man. Half the town came, curious to see the mail-order bride who had run away from Gerald Hutchins only to marry Wesley Zimmerman instead. Sarah Mitchell provided the wedding dress, a beautiful cream-colored silk that she said had been her own mother's. Willa wore it with pride, standing at the altar beside Wesley and speaking her vows in a clear, strong voice. The reception was held at the ranch, tables set up under the cottonwood trees, food and music and dancing lasting well into the evening. Willa danced with Wesley, with Tom, with several of the neighbor men who wanted to welcome her properly to the community. She danced until her feet hurt and her face ached from smiling. When the guests finally departed, and the sun had long since set, Wesley carried Willa over the threshold of their home, Naomi having tactfully decided to spend the night at a neighbor's. They made love slowly and tenderly, learning each other, and afterward lay tangled together, talking in whispers about everything and nothing. "Are you happy?" Wesley asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "So happy," Willa said. "Happier than I knew it was possible to be." "Good," Wesley said, "because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." The first year of marriage was not easy. There were droughts that threatened the cattle and late frosts that damaged the garden. There were arguments about money and about how to handle Gerald Hutchins, who made a point of snubbing them whenever they came to town. There were moments of doubt and frustration and exhaustion, but there were also moments of profound joy. The first time, Willa sold a dress she had made to one of the neighbor women and earned her own money. The morning they woke to find that one of the cows had birthed twin calves, both healthy and strong. The evening spent on the porch, Wesley playing his guitar while Willa sewed and Naomi read aloud from whatever book she had borrowed from the traveling library. 2 years after their wedding, Willa gave birth to a son. They named him William after her father, and he had Wesley's dark hair and Willa's gray eyes. Wesley cried when he held his son for the first time, great heaving sobs that he tried to hide against Willa's shoulder. "I am going to be a good father," he promised. "I am going to make sure he knows he is loved, every single day." "I know you will," Willa said, exhausted and sore but filled with a happiness so complete it felt almost painful. Naomi took to being an aunt with enthusiasm, spending hours rocking William and singing to him and declaring that he was the most beautiful baby ever born. She also, much to everyone's delight, began courting Tom, the quiet ranch hand who had been patiently in love with her for years. They married the following spring, and Tom moved into the main house, expanding it to give everyone more room. Willa's dress business grew slowly but steadily. She started with simple repairs and alterations, then moved on to making everyday dresses for the ranch women who did not have time to sew their own. Within 3 years, she was taking orders for special occasion dresses, wedding gowns, and even a few pieces for women in larger towns who had heard of her skill. Wesley helped her build a proper workroom in one of the outbuildings, with large windows for light and shelves for her growing collection of fabrics. On sunny days, Willa would work with the door open, listening to the sounds of the ranch, pausing occasionally to watch Wesley work with the horses or to wave at William playing in the yard. 5 years after their wedding, Willa gave birth to twin daughters. They named them Grace and Caroline, and they had their father's easy temperament and their mother's quick mind. The house was suddenly full of noise and chaos and laughter, children running in and out, bringing the outdoors inside, filling every corner with life. "This is what I always wanted," Wesley said one evening, standing on the porch and watching William teach his little sisters how to pet the barn cats gently. "A full house, a full life, even when they are screaming at 2 in the morning," Willa teased. "Especially then," Wesley said, pulling her close, "because it means we are here together, building something that will last." One afternoon, nearly 7 years after Willa had first arrived in Springerville, she was working in her shop when she heard a commotion in the yard. She looked up to see a fancy carriage pulling up to the house, and a woman in an elaborate dress climbing out. Willa recognized her immediately, even though they had never formally met. Mary Ellen Turner, now Mary Ellen Hawthorne, looking older and harder than in the photographs Willa had seen. Willa dried her hands on her apron and went out to meet her, curious despite herself. "You must be Willa Zimmerman," Mary Ellen said, her tone difficult to read. "I am, and you are Mary Ellen Hawthorne." "I am." Mary Ellen looked around the ranch, taking in the well-maintained buildings, the happy sounds of children playing, the obvious signs of prosperity and care. "I came to ask you something, if you have a moment." "All right," Willa said cautiously. Mary Ellen met her eyes. "Are you happy, truly happy?" Willa considered the question, thought about her life over the past 7 years. The work and the worry, yes, but also the joy. The deep, abiding satisfaction of building something with her own hands alongside the man she loved. "Yes," she said simply, "I am very happy." Mary Ellen nodded slowly. "I thought you must be. I can see it in how Wesley looks at you when you are in town together. He never looked at me like that." She paused. "I came to apologize, not to you specifically, but to this." She gestured at the ranch. "I told myself I wanted more than this. More than hard work and simple living. I wanted fancy things and excitement. But what I got was a man who drinks away his feelings and a life that feels empty no matter how much stuff I fill it with." "I am sorry to hear that," Willa said, and meant it. "Do not be sorry for me," Mary Ellen said. "I made my choices and I have to live with them. I just wanted you to know that you got what I was too foolish to appreciate. Take care of it. Take care of him." "I will," Willa promised. Mary Ellen climbed back into her carriage and drove away, and Willa stood in the yard for a long moment, thinking about choices and paths not taken and the strange way life worked out sometimes. That evening, she told Wesley about the visit, and he was quiet for a long time. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked finally. "Staying here, marrying me instead of having some other life?" Willa took his face in her hands, making him look at her. "I regret nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing. This life, this ranch, you and our children, it is everything I ever wanted and more than I knew to hope for. You gave me a week to decide my heart, and my heart decided you. It will always decide you." Wesley kissed her then, deep and slow. And later, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, they made love with the tenderness of long familiarity and the passion of two people who still chose each other, every single day. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythm of seasons and the growth of children. William grew tall and serious, with his father's love of the land and his mother's eye for beauty. Grace was wild and adventurous, always climbing trees and racing horses and coming home with scraped knees. Caroline was quieter, bookish, preferring to sit with her mother in the sewing room and learn the art of making things with her hands. Wesley's ranch prospered, expanding to include more cattle and a small horse breeding operation that gained a reputation for producing sturdy, reliable stock. Willa's dress business became well known throughout the territory, and women traveled from as far as Tucson to order her gowns for special occasions. Through it all, Wesley and Willa remained each other's anchor. They worked side by side, raised their children together, weathered storms both literal and metaphorical. They argued sometimes, as all couples do, but they always came back to each other, always chose to work through rather than walk away. 10 years after their wedding, they sat on the porch together on a cool autumn evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. The children were inside with Naomi, helping her with supper, and for a moment, it was just the two of them, like in those early days. "Do you remember when we first met?" Willa asked. "When I was trying to walk into the desert," Wesley laughed. "How could I forget? You were so determined and so completely unprepared." "You told me to stay 1 week and then decide my heart," Willa said. "Best decision I ever made," Wesley said. "Asking you to stay. Best decision I ever made was saying yes," Willa replied. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Wesley Zimmerman. I love the life we have built, the family we have made. I love waking up beside you every morning and falling asleep next to you every night. I love that you still look at me like I am something precious, even after all these years." "That is because you are something precious," Wesley said. "You are everything, Willa. You always have been." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Inside, they could hear the children laughing, Naomi's voice raised in mock scolding, Tom's deeper tones offering some teasing comment. "This is what happiness looks like," Willa said softly. "Yes," Wesley agreed. "This is exactly what happiness looks like." As the years went on, the ranch continued to thrive. William, at 18, took on more and more responsibility, working alongside his father to manage the cattle and horses. Grace, at 16, shocked everyone by announcing her intention to train as a veterinarian, traveling to California to study under a progressive doctor who believed women could be just as capable in the profession as men. Caroline, at 16 as well, took over much of Willa's dressmaking business, her skill with needle and thread surpassing even her mother's. Naomi and Tom had 2 children of their own, expanding the family further, and the ranch house had to be added onto twice to accommodate everyone. It became a place of gathering, of community, where neighbors knew they were always welcome and travelers could find a meal and a safe place to rest. Wesley and Willa grew older together gracefully. Gray appeared in Wesley's dark hair, and lines formed at the corners of Willa's eyes from years of smiling. Their hands became more weathered, their bodies more tired at the end of long days, but their love only deepened. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Wesley surprised Willa with a gift. He led her out past the house, past the barn, to a small rise overlooking the ranch. There, he had built a gazebo, a beautiful structure with carved railings and a roof that provided shade. "I thought you might like a place to sit and sew when the weather is nice," he said. "Somewhere you can see the whole ranch. Remember everything we built together." Willa cried, not sad tears but happy ones, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift and the love it represented. They christened the gazebo that evening, sitting together as the sun set, holding hands and talking about their children, their grandchildren, the future that still stretched before them. "I never thought my life would look like this," Willa said. "When I stepped off that stage coach all those years ago, terrified and desperate, I could not have imagined this happiness, this peace." "You were running toward it," Wesley reminded her. "Even then you were running toward us." "I am so glad I ran," Willa said. "And I am so glad you were there to catch me." More years passed, bringing new joys and inevitable sorrows. They lost Tom to a sudden illness when he was only 52, and Naomi moved back into the main house, finding comfort in being surrounded by family. They celebrated births and weddings, watched their grandchildren grow and have children of their own. Through it all, Wesley and Willa remained the heart of the family, the foundation upon which everything else was built. They modeled what love looked like over a lifetime, what it meant to choose each other day after day, year after year. When Wesley was 68 and Willa 66, they took a trip back east, something they had talked about for years but never made time for. They visited Boston, walking the streets where Willa had grown up, seeing the places that had shaped her before she came west. "It is so different from how I remember it," Willa said, standing in the public garden she had once walked through. "Or maybe I am so different that it seems different." "You are different," Wesley agreed. "You are stronger, more sure of yourself, but you are still the woman I fell in love with, the one who was brave enough to walk away from what was wrong and toward what was right." They returned to Arizona, to the ranch, to the family waiting for them, and Willa knew with absolute certainty that she was home. Not because of the place, though she loved the land fiercely, but because of the people. Because of Wesley, who had seen her at her most desperate and offered her hope instead of judgment. Their 50th wedding anniversary was celebrated with a huge gathering, friends and family coming from all over the territory to honor the couple who had built such a remarkable life together. There was food and music and dancing, and Wesley and Willa took to the floor for one slow waltz, moving together with the ease of 50 years of practice. "I would do it all again," Wesley whispered in her ear as they danced. "Every hard day, every worry, every moment of fear. I would do it all again for this, for you, for us." "So would I," Willa whispered back. "1,000 times over." They continued dancing as the sun set on their celebration, surrounded by love, surrounded by the life they had built together. And as Willa looked into Wesley's eyes, still the same clear blue they had been half a century ago, she thought about that desperate girl stepping off a stagecoach, ready to run. She thought about the understanding cowboy who had said, "Stay 1 week, then decide your heart." And she thought about how sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments. How sometimes running away is really running toward. How sometimes a week is all it takes to recognize the person you are meant to spend your life with. "Thank you," she said to Wesley, though the words felt inadequate for everything she felt. "For what?" he asked, smiling. "For finding me, for giving me a choice, for loving me exactly as I am." Willa smiled through happy tears. "For being my home, always," Wesley promised. From that first day to this one, and every day after. Always. They danced on into the twilight, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a love that would last not just a lifetime but generations. A love that started with a desperate flight and a simple offer. "Stay 1 week, then decide your heart," and grew into something that neither time nor hardship could diminish. It was a love story worthy of the Wild West, full of courage and hope, and the understanding that sometimes the best adventures are the ones you never planned for, the ones that find you exactly when you need them most. And as the stars emerged overhead, Willa knew that her heart had made the right decision all those years ago. She had decided to stay. And in staying, she had found everything she never knew she was looking for.